Battlefield 6 is here, or just about, for everyone. But as we continue our launch window content, let's first take a look at the day 1 or day 0 update. The Battlefield team recently detailed update 1.0.1, and today we're taking a look at what you need to know out of it so that come launch, you're 100% in the know. Drop your thoughts, drop a like, and do me a huge favor, make sure to subscribe to stay up to date with all things Battlefield 6 and even more FPS content. We've got the busiest fall upcoming in our channel's history, and we're chasing down that lofty goal of 700,000 subscribers in the near future. So I'd love to have you in the community if you'd like to tag along. And finally, check out my friends over at AdvancedGG for 30% off your entire order with code Espresso30, but more on that a little later. For now, let's get into what the update changed. So first and foremost, the major points of this update come down to a handful of different things. We're going to break down each of these sort of segments a bit further, but the main things are movement has been refined with reduction to slide to jump momentum. They lower the jump height and increase the inaccuracy when firing while airborne and sliding. Handling and general recoil tunings have been made to weaponry for more consistent gunplay. You end up seeing adjustments to Russian breakthrough layouts where it's revised a bit better for the dichotomy between attacking and defending. Audio's had some overhauls with game-wide and clearer pings, refined weapon and vehicle sounds, and more. And netcode has some more optimization to reduce desync, fast time to death, and instances with invisible damage. But that's like the top level stuff. Let's talk a little further about each of these different things. For movement, let's start there. Of course, the big things are that they reduce the speed that can be carried through a slide into then a jump. That momentum coming out of that will be something that is lowered. They said especially horizontally. They increased the penalty for repeated jumps and slightly lowered the jump height, so that bunny hopping mechanic is now no longer going to be as effective. And they also increased the weapon inaccuracy when firing while jumping or sliding, which I think makes sense. I personally haven't had the ability to test out just how different it is from the beta just yet, but that was your sort of top level things for the player movement itself. They also adjusted parachute physics where the reduction to the initial acceleration was adjusted, and they also fixed an issue with the momentum being lost when cutting the parachute. There's now smoother animations for aim down sight and hip fire for better target acquisition. The jump landing animations have been updated for a bit more smoother of a feel, as is the crouch to stand transition animations now settling a little more quickly. Overall, those player animations and movements should feel a bit more intuitive to the player as compared to what we saw in the beta. Weapons, they detailed more high-level stuff overall rather than like talking about specific weapon tuning to a degree of every single weapon. You'll see that the gadgets are something that there's a lot of individual gadget adjustments, but weaponry, it's more so like generalizations, where they said there was recoil adjustments across multiple weapons, but didn't specify exactly what. Now, having played a decent bit here with some weapons before the launch and with this update, it does feel like there is a bit more bounce and noticeable recoil. However, you have to consider that we don't have the immediate unlocks for all the attachments just yet, though. So I couldn't quite pinpoint just how much an increase to this recoil we saw at base compared to like if you have a weapon that's kitted for mitigating recoil control, just how different that would be. So that's something that will still need a little bit of testing once everybody gets their hands on with it, but they did adjust some of the recoil profiles across multiple weapons. Now, the weapon accuracy was also adjusted where it's now more stable when aiming down sight while moving, so a little bit of that strafe adjustment, but they detailed it's less accurate when firing mid-jump, so tying into those movement changes. One other big thing is that they increased the bullet spread when firing automatic weapons while aiming down sights. Now, for those that are unaware what this again is that sort of mentioned incentive to burst or tap fire your weapons. At long range, you're going to notice this. Mid to close quarters, probably not as much, but you're going to recognize that bloom or that shot deviation, the bullet spread, whatever you want to call it, where it's the cone of where your bullets could go instead of that pinpoint precise location you're aiming every single time. There is subtle deviation based off that auto fire. Bursting and tap firing mitigates this as you're not spamming your weapon at that point and having that deviation shake all around, but that's something that you should be aware of and be conscious of. The M87A1 shotgun was signaled out as it was before in the beta, and of course with the mentions leading to this update, where it now requires more pellets to secure a kill, where if you're accurate, you're still going to feel like you're absolutely shredding with it, but you need to be a little bit more accurate than you had to beforehand. They additionally fixed an issue with crosshairs appearing larger than the actual bullet. Bolt action rifles have their first shot boost now applied to every shot, and then some reticles were adjusted to improve the visibility of those reticles. Now, a lot more to talk about. Before we continue, a quick heads up, we recently partnered with AdvancedGG, as I've been loving their products for a while now, but it's finally official. To me, Advanced is that replacement for a cup of coffee in the morning, the afternoon pick-me-up, the fuel for any gaming or long content recording session. Right now, to celebrate the launch of the partnership and coincidentally, the launch of Battlefield 6, you can get 30% off your entire order from now until the 15th with code ESPRESSO30. If you've never had their stuff, they've got some really great flavors like strawberry lemonade and rainbow sherbet are two of my favorites. There's zero chalky residue, and they've got some really cool shakers. So I'd highly recommend checking them out if you'd like to fuel up for the launch. And again, for a limited time, you can get 30% off your entire order with code ESPRESSO30 or checking the link in the description below. But anyways, check them out. Back to it. Let's talk about gadgets. There's a lot of stuff that was adjusted here, some more specific than the others, but starting with sort of like general discussions about gadgets, they fixed an issue with the rocket launcher's backblast, dealing too much damage to infantry, and they also reduced the rocket launcher's blast damage against infantry to discourage ground blasting. Personally, not really a huge fan of that one, or rather, I guess better way to say it is that I don't quite understand it. I felt like, personally speaking, the blast damage when shooting the ground was actually rather low when dealing damage to infantry, but maybe that's just me. Rocket launcher explosions will now also correctly check for walls and cover before applying damage. So you could have been in a very safe position otherwise, but still taken damage beforehand. That should be fixed out now. The repair tool now overheats slightly faster to prevent it from becoming too durable. Repair tools and defibrillators can now also damage enemy gadgets and the defibs in general. The damages have been reduced for both the quick zaps and the charge zaps, so hadn't had the ability to test what this means to do for like getting kills. But I did have a sequence where I had zapped somebody twice and I didn't get the kill, so I'm wondering if that was like a prime example of what that would look like. But anyways, for specific gadgets, you end up having your RPG. That was adjusted where the sight and reticle are now positioned better for aiming, and they increase the dispersion when aiming down sights to discourage quick scoping with it. The MBT law now has defaulted for the engineer class, where the missiles will now follow a more accurate trajectory and uses auto-guided missiles. The MAS 148 Glaive now has its missile trajectory updated to better reflect real-world behavior. It has 2 zoom levels, and you can now lock onto stationary weapons and vehicles, while that distance has changed and cannot be locked on to targets closer than 40 meters. So a bit longer range here for that choice. The SLM-93A Spire will now no longer lock on to air vehicles below radar level. The Airburst Incendiary, this projectile now detonates on collisions, and the projectiles deal less structural damage with more hits required to destroy facades of buildings. The SS-26, the fire damage now only applies once to soldiers, and the damage drop-off has been adjusted. It's also been adjusted in its unlock requirement from rank 1 to rank 0, making it a bit more accessible there. The LT-LM2, its spotting angle and maximum spotting distance in binocular mode has been made more forgiving. You can no longer laser paint the environment. It now removes laser painted marks when a vehicle enters thermal smoke, and now correctly spots vehicles when laser painting them. The deploy beacon has a couple of things changed, but the biggest is now it only allows for 1 spawn per player in your squad, so 4 per squad total before self-destructing. The recon drone will now fly faster when carrying C4, but the battery drains faster as a trade-off. It no longer receives unwanted force when carrying C4, making flight smoother. Movement has been improved for a more realistic feel, and when it goes out of bounds, it will now self-destruct after 3 seconds. And finally, the supply pouch, it can no longer be picked up once deployed, and it will no longer restore health to vehicles, as well as now resupplying as intended and granting 1 additional C4 as overstock. Vehicles, there's a few things that we should talk about. There are some specifics that you can see on screen and everything, but the helicopters have been given more power and responsiveness, making them easier to fly, adjusting mid-flight, and surviving attack runs, including better chances to dodge incoming RPGs. So an overall buff to the helicopters, which for those that love the helicopters, definitely nice to see. They increase the tank turret speed, and vehicle smoke countermeasures are now more effective at breaking, spotting, and lock-ons, which is, I think, a big thing to have as a buff for those. As for your maps and modes, apparently all Rush layouts have been updated based on feedback from the open beta. I didn't have a ton of opportunities to play Rush, but I definitely did notice some of these, so nice to see. But the ones that I did is that several breakthrough layouts have been updated based on open beta feedback as well. I want to say it was Siege of Cairo that there was one in particular that really stood out to me, that I was playing with Immortal or Zach, and I was like, wait a second, this is new, right? If I'm not mistaken, I think it was the B point on the initial sector that you ended up having as an attacker, where beforehand it was just that initial constructed courtyard where the construction was happening. That now extends into the area before that as well. The courtyard that has a bit more flowers and the lighter walls that you can break through. But we saw a couple of those breakthrough layouts being changed. Spawn killing issues on Siege of Cairo have also been adjusted, where we also saw multiple exploits for Siege of Cairo and Iberian Offensive to allow players to reach unintended areas that's now been squashed. So those dealing with those rooftops, the players were able to get to that they otherwise were not supposed to be. Firestorm had a few adjustments that are like just general in perspective, where they improved the performance, they improved player traversal, they adjusted the lighting, but in terms of like hardcore specifics, there weren't a ton that went into that. Audio, there's a handful of adjustments that were made, but the most important to me, I think, are the adjustments to the incendiary and movement audio mixes. The movement audio mixes includes, or it seems like at least, footstep audio. I feel like footstep audio is incredibly present. If you have a headset, you're probably going to be able to pick this up and be able to realize, oh, this sounds really crystal clear. So that's something that you'll definitely notice when jumping in. Directional ping sounds have been made clearer, and they tuned the instant death audio mix, so making those near-death scenarios a bit more intense in that sense. And finally, networking. Honestly, all of the noted networking changes are definitely important to note. They improved netcode to reduce cases where time to death would feel too fast. They fixed an issue where players could take damage without being visibly shot at. They fixed an issue where health values were not updated correctly. They improved netcode to reduce cases of dying after reaching cover. And one that was honestly perplexing to me, and it's nice to see it written out now because I definitely thought that this was something I was just going crazy over, was they fixed the netcode issue where damage feedback was delayed or only appeared after respawning, where it seemed like you just took damage out of nowhere, but it was a visual bug, and instead it was just something that was left over from the prior life. So that's something that has been fixed out as well. And of course, all of those being good changes to the networking and experience of the player overall. But that is, in a nutshell, what the day 1 or day 0 patch changed. A ton of specific details that on screen, again, you can see if you have not checked them out already, or if we didn't have them playing at some other point in the video. You can see every single bit and piece of that if you want to pause and take a look at every single bullet point. But there has been a lot of adjustments made. They detailed over 200 of these have been made for polishing the game here for launch, and fingers crossed this does make the experience even better come release and a launch of the game for everyone. But for right now, that is where we're gonna wrap it up. Just want to fill you guys in on the newest details of what we have here for this. Drop your thoughts down below, drop a like if you guys enjoy the video, and of course make sure to subscribe because we are only just getting started with all the content here to come. But for now, thanks so much for watching. My name's been Espresso. I'll see you later. Take care and peace.